Hi, I'm David Rush. I'm co-founder and CEO of Small World. And the best advice I've ever gotten is that worry is the interest you pay on the inevitable.
Ooh, worry is the interest you pay on the inevitable. Who gave you that, or when did you find that out, David? And how's that served you?
I've heard it from a couple people. I love the quote. I think that life is about controllables and uncontrollables, and you kind of focus on what you can control and do your very best and feel like that's all you can do. So it applies to almost everything.
Yeah, for sure. For sure. Well, that definitely helps our friends in sales and our leaders know because that's all we can control. We can't control timing, though we can certainly do our best to do that. And we can't control if they answer the phone or respond to email, but certainly there's things that we can do to influence that, huh?
That's right. That's right. Absolutely.
So cool, cool, cool. So David, talk to us a little bit about why referrals matter so much to you. Because if we can control things in the sales process, I would say of all the things we can, referrals is something that we have at least a little bit of control over, right?
Yeah, no, absolutely. I mean, there's a huge network of people who have relationships that can make these referrals, and it's often reactive when they offer these up, right? So it's incumbent upon the salesperson, or the partner lead to surface those. So at Small World, what we're trying to do is create more proactive approach where this becomes part of that daily routine, and so you can take more control over the opportunity that exists within these referral networks, which is clearly a faster path to growing business than traditional cold outreach.
Yeah, for sure. For sure. So, what you said there is so interesting, and I think so often forgotten by sales reps. And that is, you have to cultivate your referrals almost like you do your prospects. You have to stay in front of them, right? You have to be top of mind, not just wait for reactionary stuff to happen. So, how David? How do we do that? Not just with your software, but just in general. How do we stay in front of our referral sources?
Yeah, I mean, it's building relationships. It's offering help without expecting anything in return. It's being thoughtful about updating those referrers with product changes that could be meaningful to customers that they might have. And so it's that balance of persistent communication with thoughtful additive interactions. And I think then you're top of mind when they're in front of their customers, and then thinking through what are the incentives, both intangible and tangible, makes a big difference as well.
So let's talk about those incentives. I think that's interesting because I've heard both sides. Some people they feel that referrals get cheapened by an incentive, and some say I'm not giving you a referral unless I get an incentive. So let's talk about those. Is either one of those right or wrong? What do you think? What have you seen?
I think they're both right. I think when you start to talk about real relationships, personal and or professional, you never want to cross that line of having an incentive be the reason that you're making an introduction. I think it needs to be relevant and timely to that person that you're making an introduction for, and the thought and mindset for that person that's making the introduction always needs to be mutual benefit. And so, that I think becomes paramount. The result is that you'll impair your trust and your network if all of a sudden that authenticity doesn't exist. On the other hand, you want to incentivize behaviors, incentives drive behaviors, and having that top of mind for, again, when you can create that match, becomes a reason to want to have that be part of your daily routine. So in other words, yes, you still want to have that mutual benefit, but if I've got 10 things to do, how does this become one of those 10 things? Well, some kind of compensation, for that makes all the sense in the world. And for us, it depends on who the constituent is that's making that referral. If it's a board member or an executive, they clearly don't need some kind of a commission. They already have an intrinsic reason to want to help. If it's a partner or it's an employee, employees already get referral bonuses, right, for new hires. Why shouldn't they do the same if it's for new business? So it really depends too on who that cohort is.
Hmm. That's interesting. You make an interesting point there. Not everybody is in sales, but everybody's in sales, right? Everybody has an opportunity to cultivate their network. So how do we do that when their primary job is not sharing referrals? How does an employee, or how do we get employees to do that?
Yeah, I mean, I think it is about operationalizing and creating a common language between the growth teams and everybody within a business, to where if there's a list of 30 target companies that the sales team is trying to meet with, more often than not, there's people within that company who maybe had worked at those companies before, so it could be previous work history. They know someone there. There's a path of connectivity, even through a third-degree relationship, and so making it easy to see that visible path, and then making it really easy for those employees to offer help and to know when that becomes a priority for the sales team, enables all of this. And so today, this is typically done on a spreadsheet. It's really reactive. There isn't a good way to sort of funnel those suggested intros. And so, again, that's part of what we're trying to solve. And I think where we've seen success with companies, getting more of that proactive behavior.
So do we get the whole company then to use referrals? I mean, is that the best way? Because I will tell you, I've seen in a lot of organizations that I've been part of where employees don't want to give up their network, right? Or they're worried that, oh, well, I was connected to David because he might hire me away. So I think there's a little bit of maybe mistrust on both sides. So how does that work in practice?
Everybody's different. I mean, relationships and referrals or warm introductions are a very personal thing. And so you've got some people who are more willing to make those introductions. And I think, again, the best connectors always want those introductions to be properly with context. They want to have those introductions be relevant. And that's what they're seeking when they get a request to make those introductions. And then there are some that it's not going to be something that they're comfortable with. They don't want to share their networks. They're not comfortable making an introduction, and that's okay too. So it really depends. So yeah, the ultimate is you've got an entire ecosystem of people within a business that includes board members, advisors, executives, partners, customers, employees, even spouses of employees, right? Or former employees. These are all people that theoretically have connectivity to the business. And every person's built a little bit different when it comes to being willing to make that introduction.
Okay. Okay. So we're not forcing anybody to make an introduction, which I like, right? That's a open thing. So with that, what are some of the current challenges out there? I mean, you guys built Small World obviously to overcome something. So what's the biggest problem that you see? Is it scoring of relationships, or what's happening?
Well, at a macro level, what's happening is that cold outreach, cold emails are falling on deaf ears. There's just buyers today don't even respond to them, and so that's become really difficult, and it really brings into question the value and payback of these larger SDR BDR teams, where how do you redirect them in a way where their time is being spent so that it's relevant. And we're finding community-led growth, partner-led growth, relationship-led growth is really this new opportunity to do more with less, because these assets of trust exist throughout every single company. And so the way we describe it is our function is to activate those paths of connectivity. And so when we do that, we look at very specifically relationship strength between an individual and a specific target prospect, whether that's a person or a company. And that helps distinguish who really does have a genuine relationship there versus just what one would call a connection. And LinkedIn's great, but connections are all treated equally, as we know. And so oftentimes those connections were someone that you connected with years ago, or just accepted an introduction request or an invite to connect without necessarily knowing them. So that's, again, part of institutionalizing this and making it easy for everybody to participate.
Yeah. So how do you know the strength of connection? I mean, how do we know that you and I are actually connected and not just connections?
That's right. We take a unique approach. There are approaches that look at email communication frequency or look at other clues and apply a score, which can work. We believe that connectors are the only ones that really know their true relationship strength. You and I may have worked together for 4 years, but maybe we didn't talk very often, or I really don't know who you are. That doesn't necessarily mean that we know each other well. there also could be somebody that I'm not even connected to on LinkedIn, but that is in my contact list that I'm very close with. That's a friend in the community who I'd be more than happy to make an introduction to. That's never contemplated through LinkedIn. And so what we do is we make it very easy for these connectors to submit their relationship strength. You would never ask somebody to rate the strength of 3,000 people that they know, but it becomes very easy when we're able to identify of those 3,000, which 30 fit the ICP of the company that they're a connector for. And so looking at specific target companies, specific buying centers, specific levels, even titles of the people that they're seeking to meet makes it really easy for me to then say, yes, I have a very strong relationship or I have a very weak relationship.
Okay, so we boil that 3,000 down to 30 to 50. Definitely much more doable, right? 1%, 2% of my network. I can do that. I could do that, probably over the weekend, right? I'd figure that out and that would be okay. So what's, so who makes the move, right? Is it sales says, hey, David, I see that you know Phil and he's someone in a company that I'd like to talk to. Are you willing to make that introduction or what does that look like?
Yeah, we kind of do it three different ways. So one is we have our own intelligence engine looking at things like recommendations, work history, location. We have a way of triggering relationship strength requests. So we'll do that through our system. We also give the salespeople the ability to request relationship strength. And so when strength is not visible, they have the opportunity to request that, where connectors can submit that through their mobile device, through email. They don't even have to be logged into SmallWorld. We make that really easy. And then the third is that connectors can proactively go in and rate. And I would suggest, Phil, you could do it in 30 seconds. It wouldn't even take you the whole weekend to go in and rate those 30 people. But we make it really simple, in those ways, so that we're capturing this really valuable first-party data, which is subjective and it's submitted by the connector. That also gives us the opportunity to look at third-degree relationships. So if we think about for a minute, you telling me those 50 people that you have very, very strong relationships with, well, now I know that I could probably ask you maybe for not just an introduction into them, but maybe somewhere that they used to work, or maybe someone else that they might know. So it really changes the way we can think about truly creating kind of a smaller world through this relationship graph that we're creating.
That's interesting. So you suggest that it's not going to take that long to rate. But I don't know, man. Like that seems like it's gonna take longer. Is it? I guess what I connect my LinkedIn in and I connect my email or what? Like, what does that look like?
Email, LinkedIn, Gmail, different sources. You bring in all those relationships. You'll see the person's name, and then it's very weak, average, strong, very strong. And you click one of those icons, and boom, you're on to the next one. And so it moves really fast. And for some, you're going to know instantaneously. For others, you might have to think about it for a second, but it's a pretty quick process.
Okay, so I do that, and then is this just like an on-demand type of when the salesperson requests a connection, or am I making sure? Because, like, for instance, we know each other now. A year from now, 2 years, 5 years, right? I'm like, how do I remember David? What's the connection there? And it might have been strong, and over time, right, it kind of degrades because we haven't stayed in touch. I mean, does it also recommend those keep in touch things, or how often? How often is too often, I guess, when let's say I'm a connector not in sales to reach out to my network?
Yeah, well, you can update the strength at any point, and you could be the other way too, right? You could be average and then go spend a weekend with somebody, and that becomes strong. And so connectors can go in and update those. We give connectors the ability to also be very proactive. So you think of how this works today on a spreadsheet. We've created sort of a smart spreadsheet where they'll see target companies, ordered based on relevance, and that includes things like location. It includes things, like work history. When we've seen some really fascinating results with indirect relationships. So it may not be necessarily someone that's in my network, but I know someone that knows someone there. It's a Austin-based company, or Columbus, Ohio-based company, and somebody that lives in Columbus knows someone that knows someone at Nationwide Insurance, right? So that's just a logical path of connectivity that we surface in a way where it's really easy for connectors to proactively help, but also be responsive to requests coming from the sales team.
That's pretty cool. So, So do we reward then those connectors in the employee base? I mean, do we give them the same referral bonus that we give them for referring an employee? I mean, what's the best practice there?
It's a great question. We just saw, one of our customers do this, and so they've taken that exact same $2,500 bonus for new hires, and they're applying that to new business. And so, if a deal closes of a certain size, they're eligible for that exact same bonus. And all they really needed to do is to broker that introduction, create an SQL. That opportunity gets flagged in Salesforce, and they become eligible for that. So, you know, we think that's the right way to do it for employees. There's different incentives for customers. There's obviously different referral, fees for partners. But yeah, that's a best practice that seems to be really logical when we think about how new opportunities are surfaced.
Yeah, well, there's less marketing oomph behind it. We're not paying for a paid ad. We're not paying for a sales navigator. We're not paying for certain things that often, or some tool to surface information that otherwise we'd see. We're instead incentivizing our employees to think a little bit about, how can we help here? How strong is that? So I really like that. So, but around frequency though, is there a really, I think referrals are going to be the way that we get into organizations. To your point, I absolutely see cold calling is brutal. We're seeing a 1 to 3% push on that. Cold outreach is maybe a little couple ticks higher, but goodness gracious, there's got to be a better way. And I think it is referrals. So how often should employees, with nothing to ask, right? You mentioned about giving without expectation of receipt. How often should employees do that?
Well, I think that speaks to this idea of operationalizing it as well, because once the connectors are in a system where they're not getting surprised with an in-mail or an email, and they understand what it's all about, and they know they can say yes or no, it doesn't feel as presumptuous from the salesperson. If you think about it, this is a system that's designed to really force the rep to provide that context and specificity as to why they're asking for the intro. So it could be they've got a quote from a press release, they've got third-party intent data, they've got something that maps to the strategic objectives in a 10K. That helps the connector know that their efforts are going to be relevant, right? And so that gives them credibility when they reach out to who they know. So that's what we really encourage as part of this whole flow. And at that point, it's again in the control of the connector, and we don't see that sort of any stoppage to that. So there's this internal network, right, and then there's the folks that they know, and then an external network as well that we can make accessible so that referrals ultimately can scale.
Wow, that's awesome. Scaling referrals and institutionalizing referrals is something I know a lot of organizations could benefit. So that's great. That's really great to hear. So with that, do we then? Is there a way to then rate the connector as far as to the truthfulness of how good they're actually doing that? Because here, people who are not in sales are probably going to underweight and say, well, I don't really know them that well, and I would maybe, right, and I'm as a sales guy, right, I can say this. I think salespeople are a little more confident saying, oh yeah, I know them. They'll certainly respond to me. And is there a way to weight that responsiveness or anything?
Yeah, I mean, we have a way of looking at the conversion rate from an introduction request to the meeting actually happening, and then tracking that deal all the way through the pipeline. So the quality of these introductions by these connectors is something that we're able to manage and measure, and then that impacts sort of the quality rating for a particular connector. One of the things to add to that makes this really powerful, of course, is that you're now able to get access into senior level decision makers who otherwise would have never been receptive to a meeting. And so a lot of salespeople will think about, hey, I'm looking for that person that's, evaluating solutions or in buying mode. And that's great. And that's timing. But there's a huge audience out there of people who fit your ICP, who, if they knew more about how you could solve their problems, because they're likely having the same challenges as other customers that you serve, would instantly become prospects. And so they're their deaf ears until somebody that they know and trust opens that door. And so this creates an incredible opportunity on the new opportunity creation side. We're also finding that getting executives and team members involved early in the sales cycles with bigger deals. This really helps create that team-based selling, right? So you can instantly see, okay, who within my organization has relationships into higher levels, so that we've crossed every T, dotted every I, and we can leverage that relationship if it's a competitive decision, if we need to access more budget, and ultimately accelerate the sales cycle.
So that's good stuff to do. You talked before about surfacing 10K data and relevant stuff. Is that determined by the marketing team on the end, or does your engine also help surface that, or how does that work?
Yeah, today it does not. Today we're looking, for the individual, salesperson to have that information sourced through whichever tools that they're using.
Sure.
There's data books and info, different tools that can surface that. We are looking at ways to apply, AI to the way that these emails get crafted and what information is accessible to make that, much faster for the salesperson. But today we look to those salespeople to have that information as part of how they would typically do cold outreach, but they're going to apply that now to a warm intro.
Cool. Cool. And do you guys plug into Salesforce currently, or is that on the radar, or what?
No, it's how our Salesforce customers access Small World today. So we really present this as Small World delivers relationship leads. So the salesperson comes in the morning, they log in, they get their MQLs, they might see their third party intent data leads, and then they've got their relationship leads. And so with confidence, they know that if they request an introduction through Salesforce powered by Small World, they're going to get a much, much higher conversion rate than if they were to do this through cold outreach. In fact, we're seeing over 50% conversion rates if there's a strong or very strong relationship from an introduction request to a new meeting. So that's the motion that we're starting to see with sales teams inside of Salesforce.
Wow. Fantastic. Fantastic. So if folks want to get started on the referral journey, though, outside of your software, we know that's going to be a critical piece. But if folks want to get started institutionalizing and get on this referrals revolution, David, what's the first and maybe second step they should take in order to do this?
Well, I mean, I think it starts with the partner program and who are those complementary, partners that you're already working with, where there's, 1 + 1 = 3. How do you, engage those partner leaders and those individual reps to become part of their talk track with their existing customers, and then start to give before you get. I think in those, reciprocal relationships, the more doors that you're able to open and think about, mutual synergies, that will naturally open up new doors. And then growth of that partner program. Who are the other, potential, what are the other alliances that can be done, to grow that? So I think it starts there, and then really inspecting those incentives and making sure that they are meaningful and top of mind for those partners that you enlist. And there's customer referral programs, right? Different animal completely. And today, a lot of those are reactive. A customer success manager has a QBR, asks the right questions about who might but man, think about the communities that these decision makers are interacting with weekly or biweekly, and what they hear. It's an incredible opportunity to enlist those customers who are already willing to be a reference, willing to provide a testimonial. They become, one of the most powerful, referral sources out there. So I would focus really heavily on customers as well.
Yeah. So customers, employees, and partners, great places to start this off. Make sure the incentives are right. And for the cost on this, right, folks can shift money from an SDR or BDR program into a referrals program, likely and probably for pennies on the dollar, I'd guess, huh, David?
Big time. Yeah, no, it's if you consider, the expense and the payback period and the output, even the best, even if they're great, they're going to get promoted. And so attrition is really high in that role, right? They're going to either be promoted, or if they don't do so well, something else will happen. So when you think about the payback and the true return on investment, there is a balance between how many people need to be in that function versus leveraging referrals.
Yeah, right on. So Folks, if you want to get started with the referrals revolution, David's got great stuff over at SmallWorld.ai. They're making referrals a lot easier. They're reducing the cost of customer acquisition through the powers of relationships. So I encourage you to check it out, see what's there, see how that fits for you. But a referrals program, absolutely important. So make sure that you have that. One last question here. Rich Hand asks, what about management, David? Is this a big culture shift for managers?
It is a great question. We've seen the most success with executive sponsorship, where there's a system in place today where they believe that this is something that can drive growth. And so, can't name the customer. We've got publicly traded large technology company, from the CEO through the entire executive team. They're bought in, and it really changes the success and the buy-in. And so, for them, it's always been something that they've done, but they've now looked at formalizing and operationalizing it, and it makes a huge difference. We had an early client where that wasn't the case, and we had someone mid-level that really believed in it, wanted to drive it, but struggled to sort of get that executive blessing. And so, from a culture perspective, harder to get over that hump. So it definitely makes a big difference.
Yeah. And what's the, like, can you identify the difference in the culture there? Is it because they're more open, or is it because they're more high tech, or is there anything in the culture that you can say, maybe this is going to be helpful, how we can identify a company that's a good fit?
Uh, Great question. Every culture is a little bit different. I think there's early adopters, and there's late adopters to every process. And I think if you think about Gong, a lot of people, it took a long time for them to believe that they needed to actually record calls, and what value that would deliver them. And now everybody's running after it because they need it, and it's like anything else. So as you think about relationship activation, as you think about warm mentors and referrals become a part of that go-to-market motion, you just have forward-thinking executives that recognize the math. They also recognize the result. I think what sticks with them, and I do this, I use our own product. And so when I look at my pipeline, one of the first things I'll say on a call with a CRO or a CMO is, would you have ever taken this call from me had you not been introduced through, Kathleen or Matt or whoever it might be? And they're like, absolutely not. And I said, well, that's what Small World,
Good
did for
proof.
me. And so that's the power of it. And I think that those executives realize that their time is so valuable that they are willing to take a call if it's through a trusted relationship. Now, the salesperson's got to deliver on that call. There needs to be some value, or they need to leave that call thinking, I'm glad I took that call. And even if it's not timely, that person was professional and presented themselves well. So that's, a risk for a connector. But at the end of the day, if they did and there is value, then the person that made that introduction actually increases their social capital with both of those parties.
Yeah. A good sales rep helps everybody, I would say, right? In that case,
Right.
helps the connector as well as the connected. So that's great. And Small World makes that much easier. So again, friends, if you're listening, if you're watching, take a look at smallworld.ai, see what David and his team are doing there, and get started doing referrals, right? Start institutionalizing referrals. Make it happen. Make sure there's some incentive for that. Can move a little bit away from, advertising as much, and incent your employees to get involved referring, because they probably have relationships they're not even aware of. So good stuff, David. Thanks for sharing today. I really appreciate it.